Welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, hello there, and welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. My name is Jon Sanders. I'm one of the co-founders of EntrePastors, and we are so excited to share this week's podcast episode with you. You're going to be hearing from a guest by the name of Lori Sheldon. Lori is an author who recently wrote a book. It's actually gone on to become a best-selling book on Amazon that tells the story of her husband's journey through a heart transplant process and her journey walking alongside of him as a caretaker and all of the things that entails. Now, this is a little bit of a different interview than the stuff we normally talk about, but there is some absolute connection to the themes at EntrePastors that we celebrate. One of those is the fact that Lori was introduced to first me and then ultimately Les and the business of EntrePastors through another business, through marketplace business activity, through a handyman business that I own. And she shares that story in the interview, so I won't go into all of that. But the theme to be celebrated is the fact that you never know how God is going to use your marketplace activities to bring about real ministry. That's one of the things we celebrate. The other thing is we are constantly celebrating authors, people who are writing books. And so we dive into Lori's story about the actual process of taking a book from an idea in your heart and getting it out into the world. And it's been really fun to walk beside her through that journey. So without any further ado, let's get to this interview with Lori Sheldon. Here we go. Well, Lori Sheldon, it is my honor and privilege to welcome you to the EntrePastors podcast, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jon.
Yeah, so let's start here by telling the story of how you got connected to this whole world of EntrePastors and then the process of you writing a book. We really want to dive into that. But let's start at the beginning of where you intersected EntrePastors. Take us back and tell that story if you don't mind.
Right. Well, it was all because of you, Jon Sanders. So I hired you. I found you on Facebook, and you came to my house to do some small little handyman project. And while you were here, we were busy talking about your life and my life. And it happened to be that my daughter, who's a full-time missionary in Africa, was flying home from Africa that day. So I was telling you about the work that she does in Africa, and you were very interested in that. So we had a great conversation. And when you finished the project and you went to leave, then I said, how should I pay you? Should we do Venmo, or should I write you a check, or how should we do this? And you said, how about if you take whatever amount I quoted for you for this job today and you give that to your daughter? I want to support her ministry and let her know that I'll be praying for her. If you'll give me a Google review, we can call it even. And I said, oh, that sounds great. So nice of you. She'll be very grateful. I'll certainly do that. So after you left and you had told me about the podcast that you did, I decided to check it out. So I looked at your podcast and I happened to just select one. And you were interviewing a woman who was a retired missionary. And she was now doing ghostwriting. And that was what her retirement job was. So she was in the business of writing books for others. So in your interview with her, I was just really relating with her. And it really made me think, I got to get on this. I knew that this book was on my mind, and I had scratched out some notes on my computer with it, but I had never done anything with it because I didn't know how to do that. So I just texted you and said, hey, Jon, listen to your podcast. And thanks for encouraging me to get going on this book that I need to write. And you immediately said, hey, can I call you? Do you have 5 minutes? You called me and said, well, my podcast partner, Les, is a writing coach. So would you mind if I connected you with him, and I'll let you two take it from there if that's something you'd be interested in? So Les and I did a couple calls. We connected right away. Les was really, really easy to relate to. He wasn't pushy or threatening or anything. He just kind of listened. Kevin and I did a couple calls with him, and we decided that it would be a great opportunity for us to work with a coach so that I could be put on a timeline so that this would actually get done. So that's how I ended up with you two.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Honestly, there's some details in there that I had forgotten about because I couldn't remember if we had talked about your book when I was there in the kitchen, hanging your TV or not. But the thing I want to celebrate in there, and I'm just going to do it, even though it feels a little self-serving. I want to model for our community. Often, Lori, we talk to pastors. We encourage pastors to launch businesses and one of the hangups they have around that is that, well, I'm called to ministry, which gets into this whole thing of like ministry happens inside the walls of a church and behind a pulpit, and the stuff that happens out there in the marketplace, we don't really know what to call that, but it's not ministry necessarily. Well, we push back hard on that narrative here and encourage pastors that ministry goes with you everywhere you go, and you absolutely can have an effective ministry out in the marketplace. And so this would be an example of that, of an opportunity that I had to just, in that moment, I literally sensed a prompting to talk to you about your daughter when I heard that she was a missionary, to just dig into that story a little. And then I just clearly sensed God saying, you're not charging for this. By the way, did you actually give Reagan the money? I'm curious.
That's none of your business. No,
Next question, she said.
I did.
No, I'm just
In
messing
fact,
with
she landed that day and I picked her up at the airport, and like about 3 sentences in, I said, "Oh, I've got the coolest story to tell
That's
you. I can't
awesome.
wait to get you home. I got to tell you this
you.
story."
That's
So I couldn't
awesome.
wait to share it with her.
Well, and again, just another small connection. Like I was able to introduce
Yes.
into Ryan Stoyer, who's been a
Yes.
guest on our podcast and is a part of
Yes.
our
Yes.
EntrePastors community. And, he had something going for missionary. So it's kind of cool. I actually bumped into Reagan down in Florida at Ryan's
Yes.
event. So
Yes.
it's kind of a cool chain of events. And again, another principle from that is it's all about relationships. As you're building a business, everything is relational, and you just never know when that next door is going to open up. And so, really kind of a cool story of how you and I got connected just through a random business transaction that turned into more of a relationship and a friendship, and a cool story. So you were able to do what they say. I don't know, Les, you might be able to speak to this more than me. They say, what's the statistic about the number of people who want to write a book? Is there a statistic to that? Because a lot of people want to write a book, right?
Well, the statistic is 80%, but I don't know about that. I think you got to define want. Some people think about it, and some people really do want to, and then some people, like Lori, take action.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's the thing, though.
That's the less. Yeah, go ahead.
It resonates with a lot of people, this idea of, a lot of people say they'd like to write a book, but very few people actually cross that finish line and do it. And Lori, you're one of those, not only that crossed the finish line, but did it in best-selling author format, which we're going to get into all of that.
And there are people that want to have a book, but writing a book and having a book, it's something. It's like wanting to be able to play the piano, but do you want to go through what it takes to really play it? Les,
I won't lie, put me in that category. I want to have written a book. I don't want to write a book. That's
there you go.
Work, and I'm not that guy. I don't like that much work. So,
hey, I know a guy, John.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, little disclosure for the audience: we are working on writing a book, and by we I mean Les. So Les, let's go, man. Let's get that book out into the world. But Lori, back to your story. What we really want to do in sharing your story is highlight your book and briefly talk about what your book is about, and we can unpack that story a little bit. And then I really can just pick your brain, if you don't mind, on the process of writing a book. Because again, we recognize you might be outside a little bit of an outlier of our normal interview here, because normally we're talking to pastors or people that are in some kind of vocational ministry. But still, there's very much value in your story about writing a book, because there are many pastors who would say, I want to write a book. So we're going to kind of dive into that with you a little bit and explore that. So why don't you just, to whatever degree you want to share, tell us what's the title of your book and what's it all about?
The title of my book is called Change of Heart. So it describes my husband's heart transplant journey, which it covers about a 5-year period of time where he went from being a very, very healthy man to someone who was sick enough to require a heart transplant. And it tells the story from my point of view. So it's really from a caregiver's point of view and what I felt and what I went through being next to somebody who was so sick and then eventually needed something as dramatic as a heart transplant. So there was a lot of ups and downs in there. We do have 3 daughters, 3 grown daughters, and they were able to interject a little bit throughout the book too, some of their thoughts and some of the feelings that they felt from their perspective. And I think that gives a really nice flavor to the book too, when you can hear from somebody who might be losing their dad. So, I mean, when they first mentioned heart transplant to me, I was like, that's ridiculous. I don't know anybody that's ever had that. I've never heard of such a thing. So I thought it was crazy. So the book kind of takes you through all those emotions that I felt watching that, thinking that there's no way we're ever going to be in that situation of needing a heart transplant. So he had his heart transplant, and he had it in Dallas, Texas. that's a whole story of how we ended up in Dallas. We're South Dakota people. Dallas is a long ways for us, but he had his surgery in Dallas, Texas. We remained there for 3 months for him to do his aftercare. And again, that was such a huge blessing because we were away from home in a tiny little apartment with nothing else to do but to heal. So that was really, it's not what I wanted to do. I thought we should be home, but at home it would have been, sidewalks and mowing lawns and things to fix. In Dallas, all we had to do was recover. So it was a perfect place for us to be.
Hey, Lori, you mentioned caregivers. That's a good place to go ahead and share who this book is really for.
Yeah.
It's for our listeners.
I think when I first thought about writing the book, it was a little bit more for selfish reasons. I wanted this book to be recorded for our family. I wanted to honor Kevin's journey of the stamina it took for him to go through this. And I wanted my girls to have this story in black and white for their children and grandchildren for generations to come, so that they would always know the story of Kevin. But as I was writing, I realized that I really was leaning into the whole caregiver role. And as I'm experiencing now with more people talking to me, I mean, almost everybody can relate to having to care for someone, whether it's your parents or, a child. For me, it was a spouse. And again, we did have a happy ending in our story. And I know that that's not always true for some people, but I just think the endurance that it requires to be a caregiver, the one that has to be the one to call the ambulance, the one that has to be the one to make the decision, are we going to drive to the hospital? I mean, those decisions having to be made all the time, dealing with insurance, dealing with the disability, the paperwork, the HR departments, all those kind of things. The patient doesn't do that. And the caregiver does all that. So I think my book really will resonate with those kind of people who are in that situation.
Yep.
I had an interesting angle reading your book as a first responder who comes into settings like you described a few times in there, where you come into a very sick person. And again, I see it through my lens, and I've never really stepped into someone else's shoes on the other side of the living room, sitting there with their big 3-ring binder that you write about in the book, with all the records and the stuff. And it's like, I get to come in and do my thing, and then we go back to the fire station and resume supper or whatever. And again, for us on this side of it, you can just kind of go, 5 years, had a happy ending. That's 5 years of day in and day out uncertainty and all of the questions that you get into that naturally as people we would go through, seeing someone we love suffer and feeling the very real ramifications of how that's affecting us. So it is a journey that you take the reader on through the book. And I'm sure you're going to continue to get a lot of people coming to you saying, man, you just put into words what I've been through, as in that caregiver role. So anything else you want to say about the story? I don't want to give too much away because at the end, I want to challenge people to go buy the book, but anything else you want to share about the story itself before we switch gears into more of the logistics of writing a book?
I think one of the connections I made after writing the story down was that when you pray, God brings you to the right people. And that happened for us over and over and over again. And until you really have time to reflect back on it, you may ignore that or not see that. And that really was the theme throughout the book, that we just, God didn't just miraculously heal Kevin, which is what I was praying for. I was praying big that his heart would just heal. Well, that was not God's plan, but instead he brought us step by step by step to the right people. And of course, the army of people that prayed for us was incredible. And there were so many times where I was too tired or too weak or didn't have the words to pray, but I knew that I had a bunch of people behind me who were carrying us with their prayers, and that meant the world to me. And I then learned that even in the book writing process, that God brought me to the right people, over and over again with you two and with my publisher. It just really, God led me to the right people, the exact people that I needed to take me through the book writing journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. And again, just kind of taps into what we were saying earlier about at the end of the day, it's all about relationship. And I know it's cliche in the church world when we talk about being the hands and feet of Jesus, but we are the body of Christ, and God uses us in the church to affect one another's lives and stories and intersect at those key moments and it's really cool when he does that. And when you get to be either on the giving side of that or even the receiving side of those relationships, it's nothing short of really supernatural and just kind of cool God stories in the making. So what would be maybe one big takeaway that you would love to see, like if you could hear this refrain again and again from people who've read your book, what would be one of the big takeaways that you'd love to hear people saying, whether to you or to someone else as they're passing your book on? Like, what do you want others to get from the book?
I think people wanted to help us so much, but nobody really knew what to do when we were going through that. And oftentimes people would say, let me know if you need anything. Let me know if you need anything. What, and then there was really nothing to do. But we had a select group of people that just did something. And I think that's one of the things I've learned from this too. When you know of someone, a family who's going through a hard time for whatever reason, if you just do something, and if it's as simple as just sending them a card, an encouraging card, that is something, and it means a lot. But there were people that just brought us food, didn't ask. They didn't say, do you need a crock pot of soup tonight? They just brought it. They just did it. There were people that mowed the lawn, didn't ask. They just came and did those kind of things for us. So, I think if I could tell anybody, people want to help. They want to help you in so many ways. And they're always asking you, how can we help? What can we do? Let us know if we can do anything. But the people I really appreciated were the ones that just stepped in and did something. And those are the ones I remember. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, congratulations on writing a book. Again, that's a huge accomplishment. It's a huge milestone. And again, that is something that can be sometimes just simplified of like, oh, Lori wrote a book. And there's so much more to the story than, oh, Lori wrote a book. Like, that's a huge accomplishment. So maybe take us back to the beginning when you had this idea of, I want to capture this story for my family, for it to live on in a book form. And then let's just kind of unpack the journey of the author's journey, if you will. What was that like for you to write a book?
It was way harder than I ever imagined. It was way harder. One of the things that was hard was that it was very emotional for me, and I didn't really know it was going to be like that. So I think I cried way more writing this book than I ever did living through that journey, way more. Every time I sat down to write, it was very emotional. So I found the style that worked best for me was to take an entire day, an 8-hour day, and just throw myself into it and just write for a whole day. And then I had to step away from it. And I would, step away for a week, something like that. But during that week, I would be thinking about what I had written about. It would kind of ruminate with me, and I would maybe decide I need to change that a little bit, something like that. So it kind of gave me time to think about what I had written. And usually after I would write something, then I would stand up and I would walk around the house and I would read it out loud. I kind of wanted to hear it from the reader's perspective, and that really helped me to shift some of my writing stuff. And a few things that Les really encouraged me on is I'm a pretty short, punchy writer. I kind of get to the point really quickly. And Les encouraged me to kind of expand that a little bit more and to let the reader in on the story and in on my feelings. He was always challenging me by saying, well, what were you feeling at that time? What was the conversation you were having? So he helped me to kind of broaden that so that my story wasn't so to the point and without color. He really helped me to add color to the story so that the reader could feel it along with reading it.
Well, he succeeded. You guys succeeded in doing that, because I felt the story on some level as I'm reading through that. I took that journey with you. Was that did you find that therapeutic unpacking all of that, or was that almost more like traumatic, reliving that through the writing of it?
Well, it certainly helped me to see God's hand throughout the process, which I may not have noticed as much if I hadn't really just dug in and written the story. So that really helped me from that perspective. It helped me to recognize all the people that were involved in helping us to find a solution and get to a happy ending. I'm an internal processor. So for me to be journaling like I did when we were going through that 5-year journal, that's normal for me. I'm not a big reactor. I like to write my feelings. I like to get it out on paper. That works for me. So really writing a book fits my style. I like that. Now, releasing it, I don't like that so much. That was a little hard.
Tell me more. Why do you say that?
Well, I don't really need people to know what I was thinking, and I was, some of my negativity. I mean, that was something that when I first had to hand it over to the editor and let somebody like really read it, I was like, oh boy, first of all, she's going to think this is awful, that it's not even worthy of being printed, and I'm going to let somebody in on my innermost thoughts. That's really uncomfortable.
Well, that I knew was not true. Like I don't think I'd have let you release it if I would have discouraged you in a kind. I'd have found a tactful way, but I would have discouraged you I know I'm
He
about as
doesn't with
tactful as
me,
a
but apparently
sledgehammer.
he can be tactful with others.
I can
That's
be
been
if
the
I
thing,
really
so.
want to be bad enough. But I can tell you this, man, it is so well written, especially for. I want to ask you a question about your writing in a moment, but you are a very good author and writer, Lori. I mean, that's when I read through it, Jon, especially after she'd done that process that she mentioned a minute ago. I remember just sitting back and thinking, this is quite good. I mean, it really, really is well written. And sometimes, I mean, with all respect to the people that are writing out there just is a difference. There should be, right? In picking up something that's written by someone who writes all the time
Right,
and
right,
somebody who, for all intents and purposes, is doing it for the first time.
right.
But you would not think that this is the first time author reading Change of Heart. You just would just read it. Just it's so well written and well done. And I'm just proud as I can be of you, Lori, for first of all just doing it, but also doing it in such a way that it's quality. I mean, it's really well done.
It's a
Well, I appreciate that. I thought you just had to tell me that when I was working with you, Les. So,
See? No, I was
no, I
actually
didn't
telling you
know
the
that you could
truth.
really tell me that it couldn't be a book. So thanks for telling me that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a vulnerable thing, isn't it, Lori, to
It
put
is.
a book out, to release it, back to your point about
Mhm.
writing it versus releasing it, because
Yeah.
at that point now everybody gets to see the work that I've done, or the thoughts that I was having, or they get to if you feel exposed. I mean, that's the word I would put to it. Having written one and probably only one book in my life, it's a vulnerable process to let others in on that. What was that like once you kind of jumped off that cliff, so to speak, and there's point of no return here, like now it's out there, did that get better? Or do you still struggle with that of like, man, people are kind of seeing into my life here?
Well, I'm getting a lot of positive. You know what really helped, Jon, is when the publisher made me get endorsements. And so I reached out to a handful of people that I had selected to get to write me an endorsement. And the endorsements were so encouraging that then I thought, okay, maybe this is okay.
Mm.
Maybe I can release this and it will be all right. So that step in the process was important too. That was really a moment of encouragement that I needed. So, and of course they were handpicked people that I liked and I knew that they would read it. And so then again, I was like, well, those are all the people that like me anyway. They're not going to say anything bad to me. But
Yeah.
again, it was,
Mm.
yeah,
Lori,
I'm
did you
way better.
have you gotten bitten by the bug in there? I mean, is there going to be something else or are you done?
I don't want any more material.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I respect that. You
Yeah,
don't want to have another amazing story
I
to
get
share
it.
about.
I
Yeah.
don't want any more amazing stories. This one was enough. There does not need to be a part two.
Good.
Now, I do, let me just say in the book, I do address this. We've never met the donor's family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've reached out to them twice in the process in which we were advised to do, and we have received no response. And that is something that we're praying about because it
Mm-hmm.
would be something that would kind of complete this for us. We would like to know a little bit about the family who so generously gave us this wonderful gift. So, we'll
Yeah.
see. Maybe
Yeah.
if that day comes, that might open the door for something.
Yeah.
Again, back to the relational thing, you just never
I
know
know.
that,
I
like,
know.
God could build that relationship and they're like, we want to tell the story and we don't know how. And then you're like, hey, I actually have done this once and I do know how and I can show you how. So you just
Mhm.
never know what God may do with that.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to get into all the boring details of just all the logistics of writing a book, but I do want to ask you, you can take this in any direction you want. Like, was there anything surprising to you about the process of writing? I'm talking more of like the editor and the cover work for the book and just the publishing, just all of that, the hiring a coach, that the technical sides of it. Was there anything that was surprising to you or awesome to you or really frustrating to you, minus working with Les? Anything else that you would add to that list?
Well, it was important that I did the writing. So I really wanted to be able to say that I wrote this book and I really believe that that happened. So for instance, with Les, he did not overcoach me. He
Mhm.
just let me write and then he would give me suggestions. I did appreciate that. I thought the process was brutally long,
Yeah.
but looking back on it, it wasn't. I did need to have time to kind of write and think and write and think. I would have liked to have done it in a way shorter amount of time. When I tell people it took a year, they're like, oh, that's so fast. I'm like, no, it was brutally long.
Yeah.
But I did, I realize now that you have to take that kind of time. So, and then I think, just the relationship that I felt really comfortable with Les. He's not critical. He didn't come at it from like a teacher's point of view. So he just said, just write and don't worry about the errors and the spelling and that kind of stuff. Just write. So that was a real freedom in being able to do that. And then when I finally moved into the editor stage, then, and she too, I still remember when I first met her on a Zoom call, and she said, Lori, I have no idea what your story's about. If you can just give me an overview of what your book is about. So I did. I told her the overview, and she just immediately teared up, just hearing my story and just seeing that she felt it, just by me explaining the story. I was like, "Oh, I think I'm really going to connect with her," which I did. We just connected on so many levels. And then, she took my work, and again, she did not overly edit it. She just made suggestions for what she thought would be appropriate. I loved it. When I read her editing notes and stuff, I'm like, I really think this might be something I can be proud of. So I was really, really happy to have her on board too. And then, publishing, that was a challenge because I thought I had a title, and then the publisher resisted my title, and for good reason. But I really thought I had my heart set on a title. And then he said, go back to the drawing board. Let's come up with a different title, which we did. And it came, my husband helped me with that. And we came up with a new title. And then we have to choose a cover. And we had a lot of different back and forth with deciding what the cover. Should I put my picture on the cover? Should I not? The publisher definitely had an opinion about that as well. So I had to decide when I had to follow my gut and do what it was that I felt was right. This is my book. It has my name on it. So I wanted to be able to really authentically make those decisions that I felt were right for me. However, I've never published a book before. So I thought it might be important to listen to an experienced publisher from his wisdom. He does this all day long. So I did listen to him, prayed about it, and just followed what I really felt the Holy Spirit was leading me to make those decisions. There was a lot of decisions to be made along the way.
Yeah, it's quite a process. A person can go on Amazon and basically just self-publish with no input from any outside sources, but that's not advisable necessarily to get the best book possible. And I think you took a better route in terms of opening yourself up for people to speak into that and be a part of different, milestones along that journey to get the right book out. And I would encourage more writers to lean that direction than just to do it all completely on their own. Les could probably say more, about that than what I'm saying, because this is kind of more his space.
Well, I'd give the same counsel, John. And some people go the KDP, the Kindle Direct Publishing through Amazon route, thinking that they can do it with a lower budget. They can kind of do it on the cheap. Surprisingly, to most people, that's not true. That's not true at all. It ends up being, when you do it yourself, it does end up being a sizable investment, rather than when you go through some sort of publisher, whether it's a traditional publisher or some sort of hybrid. They bring so much to the table. Like Lori said, they do it all the time, every day. They're just really good at it. So,
well, this may set up a good transition point for this next question, and this may not be exactly your story, Lori. So I'll say, for just in general, especially in this audience where we deal with a lot of like business themes, sometimes when someone writes a book, it is very much a part of an overall larger business strategy of marketing and getting a message out. And so there's goals that they maybe have with a book, of doors they want that book to open for them. So I want to ask you about that. Like, what is your personal, I know it started as kind of just a family memoir type of a thing. And so what are kind of your goals? What would you love to see happen now that this book is out? What are some of those doors that you'd love to see opened up? Or have you already kind of hit the milestone and said, I did what I set out to do?
Well, I am on your podcast, so I don't know how much higher I can go from there.
What else is there?
There's Joe Rogan, and other than that, that's about it. I can't think of many above. So
yeah, I think all my goals have been reached. I didn't really.
Well said, Lori. Well said. Go ahead.
I don't really have a lot of goals, and I kind of feel bad about that. But here's what I'm doing. I'm just staying open-minded to this, and whatever comes my way, I'm going to be very open to it, and I'll see what happens. I'm very happy to speak about this, if that's what doors open for me. I had recently just heard, I think it was on a podcast, that when you're called to do something by God, the success comes in just following through and doing it, instead of counting the numbers and trying to, assess how successful this is going to be. really the success comes by just being obedient to what God called you to do. So that's the stage I'm at right now. I did it. I wrote the book. I'm happy with it. I'm glad people are enjoying it. And let's see. Let's just see what happens. If somebody wants to reach out to me or talk to me further about it, I'm certainly willing to listen to anything.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about a book is it has staying power far beyond a podcast episode or, a YouTube video. Like a book can continue to speak and work for you and impact people for years into the future. So,
Let me just say that
go ahead.
The marketing part of it is awful. I don't like that part. It feels very self-promotional. Even though I put my picture on the cover of the book, that seems a little self-promoting as well. But oh man, and Les made me announce this a year ago when we started working on the writing process. He's like, get it out there, put it on Facebook, put it on Instagram, tell everybody you're in the process, create anticipation. Oh, so hard to do. I hate that part.
Well, okay, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm gonna chase that rabbit for just a minute because that resonates with so many in our audience when we talk about setting up a business. Doesn't matter what the business is, but I have a service that I'm able to provide or a product that I think can help serve my people. And yet we see this, I think it's human nature in general, and with pastors specifically, who I would contend have very much been taught to undervalue their work. They really struggle with that. So I want to peel into that for just a minute, that whole idea of promoting what you're doing. So say more about that. Like, what's that about? Why are we so hung up on telling people, hey, I wrote this amazing book about a really incredible story, and I think it can help people. Why is it so hard to tell people, like, it's available? Yes, it costs money.
It costs money. Yeah.
It cost me a whole bunch of life
experience
and pain to write it. So
I know. And I really feel like I should just give it away. And my husband's like, oh, no, you're not. You're not giving any away. No, don't you dare give this away. You let people buy it. I'm like, oh, I feel like I should give it away. Well, I'm just going to blame it on my Dutch heritage. I mean, I grew up in a small town, and it's probably my religious background that we were just supposed to be humble and not self-promote. It's probably coming from that, I guess. I don't know. It's just really hard. It feels like you're schlepping books, and that's not what I mean, if you want the book, great, buy the book. If you want to share the book, that'd be awesome too. So it's hard.
Yeah. Well, keep pushing through that, because the more people who buy the book are the more people who read the book, and the more people who read the book get opened up to anything God wants to say to them through the book. And we know God can speak directly through your word that you wrote, or he can use something you said to whisper something entirely different that he specifically wants to say to that person. And they can be like, man, I was reading your book and God said this to me. And it's like, well, I didn't even write about that.
Right.
God gets to do that because that's how he works. So my point in going deep into that example is to say, like, man, we just got to get out of the way and let God do what he's going to do with the stuff he's allowed us to build and be a part of. So I'm encouraging that. I know you get it, but I'm just, for the sake of our audience, I'm kind of picking on you here for a minute to go get over yourself and sell the book. I'm with Kevin. Like, you have my permission to give the book away when you recognize that sometimes generosity just opens the door to even bigger return, but you don't have my permission to just give it away because you don't think
it's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it, or that somehow someone is losing, you're winning and they're losing when they give you, their $15 for the book or whatever the retail price is for it. So,
and Les told me that people who finish books are much more likely to recommend the book to others. So my book is little, it's a quick read. You can easily finish this book. So that encourages me. Maybe people will refer it to other people because they did finish this book. You won't get stuck in the middle of it. You're going to want to get all the way to the end.
That book should be sitting in every little bookstore in every hospital across
waiting rooms.
We
want it in waiting rooms. That's right.
Yeah. I just thought of that, but that's a great place for someone to pick up that book and be encouraged to hear what might be possible, through your story.
That's right.
So, hey, you had a little book release party the other night, and this is a true story. I so wish I could have gone because we're local. I could have been there. I was on duty at the fire station. So I was seriously that morning going, I wonder how I could peel out of here for a few hours thought about calling you and saying, hey, tell them there's a fire and I'll come over. For this.
I could have pulled the fire alarm. I could have done that.
I was on the other side of town though, so that wouldn't have worked. You really would have had to tell them a big story to get me over there. But anyway, How did that go to gather? Tell us a little bit about that, gathering your
Yeah,
friends,
I
family.
did not know what to expect. I did not know how to anticipate what kind of a crowd we would have. So it was great. I mean, we actually kind of ran out of parking. People were really struggling to find
Wow.
parking spaces because people really turned out. So,
Cool.
and it was fun. The hard part is I only got just a few minutes with each person because I was kind of standing at the book signing table and I could only kind of talk to people as they came by to get their book signed. So I didn't get to have a great conversation with a lot of people, but that's okay. I was just so happy to see the amount of people that turned out for it to support us. And then we did a little bit of a panel. So Jeremy, the publisher, facilitated it, and my family, so Kevin and I and our 3 daughters, were sitting on chairs in the front of the room, and everybody was placed around the room, and Jeremy just facilitated a conversation, and he kind of kicked it off by starting us with some questions that our family answered, and then he walked the microphone around the room and let anybody in the audience ask us questions as they wanted to, and it was a really comfortable environment. People asked us things that I wouldn't have even thought to address on my own, so it was great to hear from them, to see what kind of stuff that they wanted to know. So, and it was quick and, over with, and we thanked everybody for coming. And yeah, it was a super fun night. It was great.
That's cool. Very cool. Well, hey, I think one of my last questions for you, unless Les has anything, is this: like, speak to that pastor or anyone who's listening to this, who is where you were not that long ago. They've got an idea has been planted in their heart for a book. Maybe they've got a few chapters, kind of the first rough pages put together, but it's just sitting there. It's kind of lying dormant. What would you say to them to encourage them to take a similar journey and cross the line and have become a published author, and not only a published author, a best-selling published author, which you are now? So what would you say to
If
them?
you have that stirring within you, I mean, it's going to make you miserable until you do something. And I do think I kind of remember in one of my calls with Les too, I had mentioned to him that I was kind of feeling a heaviness before this idea of writing a book kind of came together for me. There was just kind of a heaviness, a drudgery about me. And when I was finally released and I think we're going to get this book done. I think it's going to happen. There was just an airiness. I felt kind of a light about it. And the journey was hard. I mean, writing it was really hard, but all throughout I was like, I really need to be doing this. This is what I need to be doing. And it lifted a weight off of my shoulders to finally say, okay, I'm doing this. Now, again, for me, I couldn't have done it without a coach. I would not have been able to get this done without a coach. I did not want to self-publish. And actually, Les told me when we were working together, he's like, you don't need me. You can do this. You can self-publish. You don't have to do this with me. He very much made that an option for me. But I know for me, I needed the deadlines. I needed the accountability. That worked for me. So, I mean, I would just say, if that's what fits your personality type, find a coach, start that process. And it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding. And I don't think I've even felt all of the reward that's going to come from this yet, but I'm very
That's true.
You've just scratched the surface on the impact and some of the cool
Mhm.
stories that'll come from this. So very cool. Les, you got anything else before we wrap things up here?
Oh, just congratulations again for doing the work, really.
Yeah.
And then everything you can't control the results. You did the work, and the results are in God's hands. But man, He's showing you favor. I think that's going to continue. I love your attitude about it, where you've been obedient and now you're trusting Him for the results. Congratulations on hitting that #1 bestseller list in 3 categories. That's awesome. And so we just look forward to continuing to see what kind of people are impacted, through it. So great job.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Thanks,
Last question I've got, Lori, is where do people go get the book? And how can they contact you if someone wants to reach out and connect? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
I think the best way is probably with email. So my email information is in the book. The best place to find my book is on Amazon. It's called Change of Heart. It has my picture on the cover.
There you go.
And yes, so my email address it will be in the show notes, John.
Yeah,
Anyway,
we'll put it in the show notes, you bet.
yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
L.
buy the
Sheldon.
book. Go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off there.
It's L. Sheldon at sio.midco.net.
Very good. All right. Well, Lori, this has been fun getting to hang out with you on the podcast. I never knew back when I walked into your house a little, over a year ago, however long that was, that a year and a half later, we'd be sitting on a podcast together and you'd be a published author and all of that. But that's what you get when you hire Dakota Small Jobs.
I know. You changed everything for me, John. You changed everything.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lori. It's been fun hanging out with you. God bless. And we'll look forward to the next book that you're working on.
Thanks.
Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the EntrePastors podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the EntrePastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our EntrePastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own EntrePastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at EntrePastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.